So you and I, we attended the same major seminary for several years, North American College, Gregorian University. Question about omission and inclusion. So I'm going to ask you about the most serious omission and the most important inclusion regarding your time in the seminary. So what would you say was not taught? This is the most serious omission. What would you say was not taught in the seminary that now looking back 30 years ordained that ought to have been taught? What was not taught that ought to have been taught? And then what was the most important inclusion? What happened in the seminary that was so significant that it has forged in you what it was you've needed to live out your mission faithfully? So the most serious omission, what wasn't taught that ought to have been taught, and the most important inclusion, what was it that happened in your seminary formation that has forged in you the gifts and graces you've needed to be faithful to live your mission today?
Great question. So I say oftentimes when we're working with bishops and priests and lay leaders in our work, I think right now the most serious omission was, in one way or another, either implicitly or explicitly, I somehow got the message. Don't know that I believed it, but I really don't believe it now. That we as ordained should never be vulnerable. Maybe I just say it that clearly. I don't think we were taught how to be vulnerable. I don't think we were taught the importance of vulnerability. I think we were taught, and again, implicitly or explicitly, depending upon situations, that great leaders are vulnerable and great men are vulnerable. And
so let's take a look at that word vulnerable. So when I think of the word vulnerable, I think have a willingness to come out into the open with areas in their lives that are not all together, that are not all in control. There's an openness to be drawn into relationships beyond a functional, so there's not just a negative side to vulnerability, there's a positive side. So when you say taught to be vulnerable, what do you mean?
Yeah, so it's literally like able to be wounded, right? And so I think it means everything from in an appropriate way bearing our scars. Mm-hmm. Like Jesus is vulnerable. Jesus shows his wounds. Jesus doesn't hesitate to show his wounds. Jesus doesn't hesitate to show all his emotions. The Lord sweats blood. He cries over Jerusalem. He reveals his pierced heart to Thomas. What I mean when I say that is great leaders are able to be at one and the same time. It's strong and genuinely human. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying that we should be doing therapy from the pulpit. I'll give you an example. So I was sexually abused when I was a kid, and I don't even know when it started. I remember very clearly the day it ended, but I don't remember when it started, and it was from different people. I would never have thought of sharing that 30 years ago, maybe outside of with a spiritual director. I share it all the time right now. And I share it because for a lot of reasons. But I think it's the church is in, I think, desperate need of learning how to be human again. I think that's actually one of the most fundamental problems in the church. We relate, very functionally and transactionally to one another, often. Not always, but often. And you can't love what you don't know. And unfortunately, our parishes, more often than not, are so big that we can't know each other. And so it's no surprise that we often talk to each other and relate to each other the way that we do. And I think it's incumbent on those who lead to let themselves be known. That doesn't mean you got to know every intimate detail of my life, but that's one of the ways I want people to know me. And because I'm also, self-knowledge hopefully helps us to grow in kind of like emotional intelligence. And so we're aware of how we come off. And I know one of the ways that I, especially when I was younger, can come off is either cocky or arrogant or self-assured, which actually was just a mask for feeling woefully insecure because of what had happened to me as a child and thinking that I actually just didn't matter. So I masked that with, I just don't care I don't care what you think of me, because I don't want to get hurt again. So for those, who can come off that way, to actually reveal, I'm aware of that. And in fact, this is who I really am. And we all have masks, and we all have wounds, and we all struggle with things. And the Lord's in the business of putting us back together and of using us to help heal each other. And nobody hears all together, can be very helpful, I think.
Yeah, just to confirm that. So I've been doing radio ministry for 18 years. And on Fridays, my wife, Carrie, is on with me. And when I bump into people or people contact me in whatever form and they talk about the radio program, almost without exception, they'll say, I love your program, especially Fridays with Carrie, because it's so genuine. It's so real. We are willing to disclose that this is the reality of what it is we're walking out right now. Not it's all perfect and we're on the radio, therefore we're the teachers, we're up high and we'll condescend to share with you wisdom that hopefully one day you'll be able to get to where we are. And so having that sense of authenticity and genuineness is so very powerful, because it makes you're a witness to a truth, not just someone who's a scholar of the truth. So
yeah, I appreciate that. I'm really not interested in being a scholar of anything. I want to be conformed to him, and I'm grateful for the education that I have and what I've been blessed to learn in a variety of different ways. But man, I got a lot still to learn. What I most want, especially as the culture gets less and less human, I want to try to model a way of being human. It's so essential. It's one of our apostolic values in our work. Like, we give each other permission to be real. Like, it's okay to not be okay. So I think that's the biggest omission.
all right, let me, I'm going to dive into, do you want to talk about the greatest gift you received, or a great gift? Because I've got a bunch more.
I'll do it real quick.
Right.
So it wasn't something that was, it was something that came, it didn't come formally. It came just by being in Rome. I think the biggest inclusion was the desire for magnanimity. Being in the presence of the saints, quite literally in the presence of the saints, in the remains of the relics, in the presence of John Paul, as often as we were fortunate to meet him. It roused ever more in me, or confirmed ever more in me, a desire to be great for God, not for me. I could give a flip if anybody ever knows my name, but I deeply believe that every person has within them a desire to be great. And the saints model for us what greatness looks like.